Welcome back to Saxon on the Pod. Today we have on Rob Phipps. Rob has an absolutely incredible journey. He went from being homeless and battling meth addiction to doing a complete 180 and becoming an amazing husband and father, successful in his career, and even competing in fitness competitions. Rob is now heavily involved in helping others overcome addiction through the 12-step program. His story is really inspiring to anybody battling addiction or just trying to take their life in a different direction. I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. Also, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us bring on new guests who you find interesting. Thank you. Rob, I'm stoked that you're here.
I'm happy to be here.
I've wanted to hear your story for the longest time, but I've never come to your office to sit down for an hour or so.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. I don't know anything about your upbringing, anything like that. What can you take us from the beginning?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, pretty normal childhood. I mean, I had both my parents in the home. My dad's a real hard worker. He 12 to 14 hour days working. So, far back as I can remember, great childhood, just grew up doing everything kids in my era did, collecting baseball cards and
Playing marbles
for sure. And, riding bikes and skateboarding and, all that cool stuff. Played a little bit of sports. Really pretty dang good childhood up until, for me, probably around like middle school age, I started feeling like maybe out of place or like having a harder time fitting in. I mean, I always had a few friends, but just like started having a hard time in school. And
did you grow up in Salt Lake Valley?
Riverton. Yeah, Riverton. So, but yeah, Salt Lake Valley and bless my parents' hearts. I just think they didn't know how to deal with a kid that was, maybe having some issues or struggling in certain areas. And so they started at an early age, man. I think it was probably like middle school age. They started taking me to like psychiatrists and psychologists. What's wrong with this kid? Let's put him on Ritalin, all the stuff that kids like me went through. And I just remember, I don't know if I ever really thought that there's anything wrong with me. You know what I mean? Like, and now I look back at it and I'm like, man, boys just don't want to be cooped up in a classroom. Like they want to be out there, doing stuff. And so I remember him trying to give me like antidepressants and Ritalin and stuff like that. And I never wanted to take the stuff. I'd put the Ritalin in my mouth and go in the other room and spit it out.
Yeah.
And later I figured out, damn, that's good stuff. I probably should have hung on to that. Later in my drugs and alcohol years, I thought, man, I should have taken that stuff. But yeah, just, and so kind of went through a rough middle school age. I had back then, gosh, I was getting into, shoplifting pretty heavy. Like I used to find it a challenge. I would go to like the grocery store and, I would see if I could shoplift something off every single aisle in the grocery store. That was my goal. And so
13, 14.
Yeah, probably 12, 13 in that age range. And it got pretty tough because you get to like the baby aisle and you're like, what am I going to steal here? So I'd open up like a bottle of baby juice and take a couple swigs and put it back, and just doing stuff like that. Started smoking cigarettes and, stealing cigarettes and smoking those. And that's kind of how my middle school went. I had a little reprieve from that behavior though. My next door neighbor growing up, there was a really solid family that lived next door, solid LDS family. But they weren't like a judgy LDS family. They were like, we hung out all the time, and I was friends with the oldest in the family and the somewhere in the middle. They were both probably my best friends in the neighborhood. And so going into high school, I got involved with the older son. He was like an SBO and stuff like that. And so he was real popular, and he got me Yeah, student body officer. And so I got to hang out with him and all his friends, and he got, cheerleader girl to go to a dance with me and all this stuff. And I did good for about a year, and then he graduated. And then my junior year, I was just hanging out with different kids and stuff, and just kind of, I was at a party. This kid's parents were out of town, and they were all standing around the garage, and one of them pulled out some marijuana, pulled out a joint, and they started smoking it. And, the first couple of times they passed it my way, I was like, nah, I don't want any of that. I had Nancy Reagan in my head, just say no. You know what I mean? Like, this is drugs, And I said no the first couple of times. And then these guys, I started to notice they were laughing and having fun and stuff like that. I don't know what it was, but I decided to, take a hit of it. And a lot of people say when they smoke pot for the first time, like, it doesn't affect them the first time, but it affected me. Like, I remember, the biggest thing I remember is just being starving. Like, I was so hungry after we smoked. Yeah. And the kid's house that we were at, his mom worked at McDonald's. And so in their freezer, they just had stacks of like frozen burger patties. And so we were in the kitchen, like, cooking these things up, like, left and right, and just housing them. And this is where, looking back now, not then I didn't notice it, but looking back now, my alcoholic and drug addiction tendencies, I can clearly see. Like, it was probably an hour and a half after smoking that first joint. And I remember going up to the kid that had the weed, and he was like passed out on his bed. And I remember sitting there trying to wake him up, like, hey man, do you got any more of that stuff? And so that was early on. I realized, like, maybe I'd been so uncomfortable in my own skin that the first time I had a chance to feel something different, it was off to the races for me, that's hindsight. But in the moment, it was like, I want more of this. Like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? Like, and so after that, it became, hanging out with these guys, getting high. Shortly after that, drank alcohol. I mean, geez, my first time. So that's the thing. And, the difference between like somebody who drinks some alcohol and say an alcoholic is like, if a non-alcoholic has a couple of drinks and they start to feel different, they're like, I'm good. Like, I don't want any more. Like, cause they like the way they feel, and so
they like their owns.
Yes. As soon as they start to feel different than they normally do, they're like, well, I'm good. I don't want
really interesting to never heard it put like that.
Yeah.
You liked it so much because you were kind of uncomfortable, didn't know where you fit in, and that made you feel like you got away from that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Well, it was the exact opposite. So for an alcoholic, they start to feel different and they're like, give me more.
But for you, it made you feel different. So
yes, I wanted more.
Yeah.
Immediately. Yeah. From the very first time. And so my first time getting alcohol, I remember we went up I think it was Butterfield Canyon up there in Harriman, and we got like a 12-pack of I remember it was Budweiser Ice. So that was one of the brands they had back then. And then, and then some wine coolers. Like, we hung outside Maverick, got someone to buy it for us, and then went up into the mountains. And I think most of the kids had maybe one wine cooler and one beer, or one beer and no wine cooler. I had like 4 wine coolers and 2 or 3 beers. You know what? I was like, my first time, I was trashed. Yeah. And what better to do after you're trashed? And well, let's go somewhere, So luckily I wasn't driving. So we got in the car and went back down in, and it was just a mess. Like, I remember we went into a gas station, and there was this girl working there, and apparently like I proposed to her, and like I was in love with her and all this stuff, but I'm just sloppy drunk, Yeah. And so that was my first experience with alcohol, and that was around 15, 16 years old. So that's when about this all started. Junior's when it started. And backtrack a little bit. Actually, I think before weed, before alcohol, I think I had some mini thins, the little cross tops, the little.
I don't know how many things are.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Outlawed long before your age. Trucker speed.
Yeah.
For those who are hearing this and they're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember mini thins.
Yeah.
You would find them at convenience stores,
Yeah.
gas stations, and it basically was straight ephedra.
Yeah. Right up at the cash register.
Straight.
Really?
6 for $1 in a little packet.
Yeah.
And if you ate all 6, it made your hair feel like it was growing on your head.
And I maybe have told you the story, who took like 2 dozen and they had to pump his stomach.
Oh, geez.
And it was a train. Mini thins were a big deal back then.
Never heard of them like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and I you and I have had this conversation. They were straight ephedra.
Oh, yeah.
25 milligrams of straight ephedra and heavily abused, almost like a weight loss thing, but truckers took it to stay awake.
Well, and they really had an effect. Like, I remember clearly I was in school when I took them the first time, and I brought half a dozen people to the gym with me to show them that I could grab the rim because I was on a fish. I literally could, man. That was the first time I touched the rim was on mini thins. So.
You are an alien. I know there's people listening. They're like, I remember many things.
Yeah, for sure.
Those things.
I wish they still had them. With inflation, they'd probably be like $7 a pack now, though. Huh?
There were some deaths because of mini bins, and that's
And they were just straight, quote unquote, over the counter. Just buy them.
Well, it's basically what you could make meth out of them if you extracted the main ingredient.
wow. Well, now if you go to Maverick or 7-Eleven, you go to the checkout, you'll see like, I don't know, like Black Hornets and what's the new green stuff that's there, Kratom
Yeah.
and all this. Like, that's going to be there for a while, but eventually it's going to get out. That was mini thins.
Yep.
It's money.
They had a good run.
Yeah, they did.
So that was, my first few experiences. There's plenty of stories I could tell you, but by the time I was, 18 years old, I was a daily user of pot. Started using mushrooms, other hallucinogens, things like that, and had some. To be honest with you, had some pretty cool experiences on that stuff. There's a lot of people that talk about that kind of stuff nowadays, mushrooms and LSD and different,
Hallucinogen.
hallucinogenics. And the difference I would say between that stuff and say meth and weed and all that other is like when you eat mushrooms or take acid, like you're not like, oh, I want more, like the next day. It's not something that you're going to do every single day. Like you take it, you have kind of a spiritual experience and you're like, oh, I'm good for a while. It's to where I feel like it's kind of different than those other drugs. I still don't use any of that stuff today just because I don't need to go, slippery slope for me most likely. But I feel like they are a little bit different in that category. But I started using that stuff. So halfway through my junior year, my parents are besides themselves, not knowing what to do with me. At this point, though, I've taken hallucinogens a couple of times and I've smoked weed and I'll drink alcohol, but it wasn't like my thing was drugs, more drugs. Alcohol was like a last resort if I couldn't get drugs. And, at this point, my parents, they don't know what to do. They're trying to, talk to me and and I'm just like, there's nothing wrong. Like, I just want to smoke a little weed, Yeah. And so their solution was, we're going to move, we're going to move. So we moved from Riverton, to Layton, Utah. And we went up north there. And those geographical things, they don't really help because
They're gonna make it worse.
No, yeah, it really did. You mad and get in with a new group of, people that are using and they're using meth, and they're using heroin. And so, meth, yes. Yeah. Using that stuff in high school.
So did you, when you were 17, 18?
Yes. Around 17-ish.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we moved up north and it wasn't but a few months and I was on meth, you know, using that as, that was even the next, you know, that was like, okay, yeah, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. Cause especially if you're someone that, and I don't know if I believe in this stuff anymore, ADHD and all that stuff, but if you're someone that's typically diagnosed with that stuff, if you take meth, it fixes you. Like, it just makes it so you can focus on whatever.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I could write poetry, I could play guitar, I could do all this stuff that, you know, on that, until I couldn't. The problem with meth is it just progresses really fast.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So do you remember the first time that you used meth?
I do. Yeah.
How was it introduced to you?
I was at like an alternative high school. You know how they have like the Valley or the Mountain High or whatever, where it's like you're not going to cut it at the regular high school. So we'll go to this one where you can sit and do packets. There was a kid there that had some, and I think I just did it. Just took a line of that stuff, and man, just felt like $1 million.
This reminds me. What's the show with Liam?
I was just gonna say The Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh yeah, it does kind of go down.
That's exactly what came to my mind. And that is insane to me. And so this would be your senior year? Junior.
Junior's when I started, and then it progressed through senior.
And that was, I assume, the same as the first time smoked pot. Like you said, that's what you were hooked.
Yeah, I was definitely hooked. And the problem with like meth just makes you, the first few times you use it, it makes you feel so good, and then you are chasing that feeling.
And it's from there to the high, never
diminishing return, and
yep. And then it's got you more and more, and then you got to take it different ways and just the amount. But yeah, but by my senior year, I mean, and here at this point, I have my parents are just like, you know, we don't know what the heck we're going to do with this guy. At this point, senior year, I don't know if I'd completely dropped out of high school. It's a little bit fuzzy, but I may have been somewhat tied to an alternative one in my senior year, but pretty much not. And just out kind of running and gunning, you know. And so my parents had always told me, they're like, hey, if you're still doing this stuff when you turn 18, like, you're out of here. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and I'm sure they didn't want them being around that stuff. So they're like, when you're 18, you're gone. And I was kind of like, as soon as I turn 18, like, middle fingers, you know what I mean? Like, I'm out of here. Like, screw you guys. Like, they were the bad guys at this point in my life, you know, which hindsight, them throwing me out probably saved my life, or I'd most likely be living in my mom's basement smoking weed still today. You know what I mean? Or if they would have just kept me there and let me just do that, then that's no. I was like, see you later.
Yeah.
That's got to be a hard choice as a parent too, because they loving you, they probably don't want to kick you out, but they know that it's enabling you. It's bad for the kids. Have you talked about that with them since then?
Yeah, they were doing some, like, I think they were called tough love classes or something like that, because they just really didn't know. I mean, I was their firstborn. They'd never dealt with anything like this. Like, they didn't know what to do, you know? And so someone out there who they were talking to gave them that advice, and them not knowing what to do, I'm sure it was hard for them, you know? I don't know if they were really prepared for me to pack my bags and leave the second I turned 18. Like, I think they thought maybe that the threat of that might sober me up, but I was just like, this is I've got a place to go. So
were you using every day?
Oh, unless I couldn't get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Every day.
Yeah, every day.
When did you were you in high school when you turned 18?
No, I turned 18 in June. So right after.
Okay.
Yeah. So then I bounced. I had a group of friends that I hung out with, and they had an apartment, and you can move in here. And I got a job at this point. It was at Tony Roma's. Yeah. Oh, so good. Yeah. So good. And I think I was a dishwasher there. And like I blew past, a point in my life where I did have a job. My first job was McDonald's. Lasted there. I was actually sober throughout that period, but I was jacking car stereos and doing some other shady stuff. But by the time I got to Tony Rome, was like, I don't think I'd held down a job for more than a month. I could not hold down a job. I'd get that first paycheck and then I'd go get loaded. And then that became more important than anything else in my life. So if I had to be to work the next morning and I was up till 5 a.m. doing drug, and I ran out and I had to get more drugs, that was more important than going back to that job.
It's crazy.
So yeah, I burned through.
Just consumes you.
Yes, absolutely. And there's people that are functioning drug addicts and alcoholics, and I wasn't one of them. Like I guess I did. It's funny because salesmanship's in my blood. My grandfather's a salesman. My dad was a salesman. And I kept trying these foods. The only job I could get was at restaurants, right? But when I figured out that if I bought a certain amount of meth, which would be an 8-ball, it was $180. I could break down half of that 8-ball and sell them for, and get 4 quarter grams, and I could sell those for $25 each, or no, 8 quarter grams, sell them for $25 each, get enough to buy another 8-ball, and then still have half of that for my personal use. And so that's the route that I went. And after I couldn't pay my rent with this is funny, but after I couldn't pay my rent with my buddies and they kicked me out, one of my stops was I met these other 2 winners, and they were kind of doing the same stuff I was, but we found on 25th Street in Ogden, there's this shady, like, rent by the week hotel down there, and it was $200 a week, and there was 2 beds and a pull-out couch, and I bunked up with these dudes living under 25th Street in Ogden, and I had to factor that into my using. Like, I had to sell enough to pay my portion of the 200, but I ended up, staying a couple months there as well throughout this time frame. And yeah, it was pretty crazy. I did also throughout, and the timelines might be a little messed up because it's a long time ago, but I did have friends that their parents were really kind and loving people who would let me stay there, for a certain amount of time till I'd overstayed my welcome. So I was kind of couch surfing at the time and stuff like that.
Were you still in touch with your folks?
I may hit them up from time to time to try and get some money or something, but not.
Because it's interesting, and I've heard not all of this story, but bits and pieces of it, because you and I have been friends for 15 years. Your demeanor is not a mean one. Even when you're pissed, Rob, you're pretty kind. And I try to envision you as a heavy drug user and what your demeanor must have been. And I can't picture it. I don't know, but you're probably still a really kind,
Happy,
gentle person.
Yeah.
I mean, do you recall, or how would you describe?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably similar. I probably did get ripped off a few times, just trusting people too much and, stuff like that. In the drug game, it's not really there's some, I mean, heck, there's tons of crazy stories, man, I could get into. Like, one of them, we had this guy, our main connection for meth was this dude, we'll call him B because I don't want to say his name, but B claimed he was a part of the mafioso, and he would call us up, and he's like, hey, I'm posted up down here at the Holiday Inn. I got a room. Let's come down. Let's sell some dope, And so that's why I brought up coming from a long line of salesmen. I was pretty I mean, it's the same thing I do today with what I do. Like, if I needed money, and this is bad because I feel horrible about it, but I had a list of people I would call, and I would and maybe they were only potheads, but I'd be like, hey, I got some of this, you know what I mean? Like, I would try and I'd get on the phone to sell this dope so I could get more dope so I could keep things rolling, and it was just prospecting for drug sales. So, yeah.
I don't think people look at it like that. They're like, drug abuse is a dark corner that they don't want to envision. They put everything but you and I have talked about this, and it is a business. Like the drug world is a business.
Absolutely.
Everyone. And as you talk about prospecting, it's funny, right?
Yeah, it was some sorted. I mean, I don't know if this guy really was, but this dude was crazy. Like, I remember one time he picked up a couple of us and took us out to some like trailer in the middle of nowhere. Like, I mean, it was like in the woods or something like that, just something crazy. And it's just, all this is happening at like 2, 3, 4 in the morning, because that's when the meth people come out, you know? And so we're out there in this dude's trailer out in the middle of nowhere. And all of a sudden he starts freaking out. And he's like, "Who has my digital scale?" And we're like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "My digital scale. Like, one of you guys stole it." And he pulls out a revolver and he starts like loading it. And he's like, "Nobody's leaving this trailer until I find my digital scale." And I was just like, we're like, none of us freaking, like, what are you talking, you know? But I mean, that was a scary, I can't remember how we got out of that thing or what ended up happening, but this dude was crazy, man. He walked around with a fanny pack on, and he would have like an ounce of meth broken down in 8 balls in his fanny pack. What do you need? What do you need? Just pull it out of the fanny pack, bro.
Like a vending machine.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah.
So you,
I feel bad laughing at these stories.
Oh, they're funny, man.
Then I've heard them. I've heard some of them, and they're funny.
Yeah.
Because look at you now.
Yeah.
How the hell was that your life?
But for the grace of God, bro.
would you ever have met? Well, you probably didn't want to get out of it back then.
No.
Yeah, that wasn't even it.
I honestly thought I was going to end up being a rock star or something like that. So I had me and some of my buddies, we actually started a band. Like, some of their little sisters had one of them got a drum set, and the other one got a guitar, and the other one got a bass. Like, they were all friends and they never used them. So one day we're just like, let's start a band. And we were just, we went out and started jamming out, and I think within a day or two we had like at least just a small something where like I would play the bass, the other guy'd play the drums, and I'd scream and like, "Oh dude, we're musicians," Yeah, we were going to make it. And we kept with it though. I mean, obviously whenever we were loaded, we would practice, and got to the point where we had a couple like somewhat songs and stuff like that. And like all their little sisters were like groupies, and like it was a pretty, I mean, that bright spot in that thing. Like, I really thought I'd be a rock star, but this is where this stuff's so wacky. And I think like meth and things like that, like it like will tap you into, I don't know if like, cause I don't know how familiar you are, but some people when they're taking meth, like they'll stay up for 5, 6, 7. I mean, there's people that have been up like 14 days without sleeping. Right. And so just like, what I found, I would go about 3 or 4 days without sleeping, and then I would get to this like just.
You say that again. You would go 3 or 4
days without. Absolutely, yeah. I think my max was like 5 days, but yeah, like 3 or 4 days was an average for me of staying awake.
That was the routine. 3 or 4 days,
and then crash for a day or two, and then start it all over again. Yes, yeah. But after 2 or 3 days of being awake, I feel like my belief is either some evil demons can just jump into your vessel and take over, or your subconscious takes over. So, and you're just like, kind of like you said, a walking zombie, right? So what would happen is, this is kind of crazy, but we did like through some period of time, there was a big house where a bunch of us lived in, and everyone paid a little bit. And we had like a full on like drums, guitar, bass, all this stuff downstairs. And we would be up for like 2 or 3 days, and we would go down there and just jam out. We could play like, I mean, it sounded amazing. Like, we're like, holy cow, this is like, we're legit, right? And then the next morning, like after we'd crash and wake up, we'd be like, how in the hell like, what were we playing? Like, we couldn't remember any of it. And I thought maybe it was just like, we're hearing something different because we've been awake or something like that. So what we did is we took a cassette recorder, and we would write, okay, Rob's on bass, so-and-so on guitar, so-and-so on drums, and then we'd record us playing, and then we'd go back and listen to it. And I shit you not, like, this music was like, we were jamming out, dude. Somehow, like, some way, like, our subconscious had taken over and we could play like no other. Like it was nuts. And there were other times where, another example was, this is so funny to think about, but I was staying at my buddy's house and for a long time, and then they finally kicked me to the curb or whatever, but they had a camper on the side of their house, like a little tiny trailer, like an Airstream type thing. And so he'd sneak me into the trailer. And so we'd been up for 2 or 3 days, and we had like a little setup with a little guitar and a little amp and stuff in this trailer on the side of his house. So we're out there one night, and he'd be like, play this song from Tool, and I could play it. And he'd like, play this song from Marilyn Manson, I could play it. Like, I had no idea how. And then like when I'd sober up, I couldn't play any of it.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It was the strangest thing, man. It was the strangest thing.
Try playing guitar since?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can mess around on a guitar pretty good, but like I actually, semi-recently, I bought my son a drum kit, and then I bought a guitar, and we were kind of jamming out, and I thought, I'm going to go get guitar lessons. And I sat down with this dude, and he was trying to teach me some of the stuff, and my head was just spinning, bro. I'm like, I just want to do it. It's kind of one of those, like, if you've already got something figured out, like, to teach an old dog new tricks is like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I had never touched a guitar before and I went and met with this guy, I think it would have been totally different than the idea of playing the guitar, what I had in my head versus what he was trying to teach me was something that, and like when he started, I was like, I don't want anything to do with all this. I'll be a death metal singer instead.
So at this point, you're 19, 20 years old, just
19, yeah.
You're going on a weekly rental, you're couch surfing, you're just kind of shacking up wherever you can.
Basically homeless, yeah.
Yeah, you're homeless.
Yeah.
As a entrepreneur, breaking down anal,
yeah,
dealing with crazy cats in their trailers.
Yep. That's pretty much it. It progressed pretty bad for me. I started using really hard. I dabbled in heroin. It wasn't my thing. But yeah, I'd taken, so basically at this point, I burned all my bridges. You know, I'm 19 years old. All my friends, I can't stay, their parents don't want me living there anymore. I mean, and my friends that had apartments, they didn't, cause I was just a liability. I was, you're always welcome if you have some drugs. Like if I showed up with an 8-ball, come on in. But the second that's gone, it's like, you got to go. You know what I mean?
I heard a quote once, and I want to get your take on this. Thief will steal your wallet. A drug addict will steal your wallet. You look for it.
Yes. That's totally true, bro.
Truth to that.
Yes. I was on the other end of that. So I'll get into it, but I didn't do a ton of stealing like with my using. But I remember one time I'd been up for, 3 or 4 days or whatever, and I had some dope. Like I had enough to stay high and keep selling and doing my thing, right? Well, I was like nodding off because I'd been awake for so long, and I was kind of like, just doing that number. And I think one of the times I nodded off, some of the guys I was hanging out with stole my drugs from me. And my drugs were everything for me. Like, that's my meal ticket. That's where I'm going to have a place to stay. That's where I'm making my, like, at this point, and the 2 or 3 guys that were there, when I came to and realized I didn't have any dope, they helped me look for it. Yeah, they totally helped me look for it, dude. So I'm still wonder which bastard it was that took that. I mean, I guess now it's a blessing because that was one step closer to but here's a point where I feel like I was at a real low point, okay? So when that happened, when I lost that dope, that was everything to me, right? That one, because that's my source of income. That's everything.
How old are you at this point?
19. Yeah, this all happened like in my 18 to, so I started 16. My drug and alcohol career was 16 to 19 and a half, like about.
Sure.
Yeah, short, because I went straight to the hard drugs and it took me down quick.
Yeah.
So I hit a bottom pretty quick. But this is what was part of my reaching my bottom was after that dope was gone, I had reached out to my grandparents and asked them, and I knew they knew what the money was for, but I asked my grandparents if I could, I was really close with my grandparents, if I could borrow $500 or whatever. And my grandpa lent me the money. And I remember going over there to pick up a check and walking around their house and looking at something like they had a police scanner and some other things. And I remember looking at it thinking I could probably hawk that and get some money. Like I'd never stolen from them before, but I remember having that thought at that time. And that was part of the, thing that brought, when I started noticing I was doing that, like.
So you were still cognizant enough to say, how describe that? Were you disappointed in yourself that you would have that thought of stealing from your grandparent? I mean, what were the feelings?
Clearly I was later. That's how I look back on it. At the time, I don't know if that's what I don't know what stopped me from doing it. Clearly I still had some kind of I really loved I was really close with my grandma and grandpa. And so, he gave me the loan, and I'm sure that started off on another bender. There was this lady that we were getting our dope from at this time that, if I was buying dope or going over there, like I was always welcome at her place if I was somewhere, in the process of buying or selling, whatever. And so I would always, that was like the bottom stop. Like that was a bad place, and, this is, at this point, I'm trying to back up a little bit here. So I had my closest friend that I lived with for quite some time. At this point for a few months, we'd been wanting to get sober, like wanting to get off the drugs, trying and failing. Like at this point I had I'd be like, okay, I'm never doing this again. And then by the next morning I was loaded again, and, we decided we were going to try and get into this place called VOA, Volunteers of America. It's like really your last option, where if you want to get sober, then you call them until you get a bed. There's a bed available, and then they'll take you in, and then you spend about 30 days there. And then they put you into what was called pre-treatment, which was a Salvation Army. And then if you completed that, you'd go to a treatment center, and this was all paid for by the state. So that was my way out. That was my only plan. My parents had put me in like an outpatient treatment. It didn't work, all that stuff previously. I kind of glossed over all that. But so we're at my buddy's house, and we're using his phone to call. We're both planning on going into this place, right? Well, he's calling first because it's his house. Finally, a bed opens up. So his mom's like, okay, I'm taking him down there. Where do you want me to take you? And my mind is like, my alcoholic mind is like, take me to the drug dealer's house. I didn't say the drug dealer, but that was my go-to. I'll go use her phone, right? And so I went over to her house, and that turned into another week of drinking and drugging. And what happened was I was taking in pretty large amounts at this time of meth, amphetamine. And I remember I just came out of the bathroom, just took a huge dose, and I was walking down the hall. And the next thing I know, I was flat on my back, and the drug dealer lady and the guy that lived across the hall were talking about getting my body out of there. And I don't know if they thought I was dead or that I was just out, but they're like, we got to get this guy out. You know what I mean? And I came to, and at that point in my mind, I had what I know now was a complete surrender, which is needed for recovery. And I'm sure everyone's experienced it. If you're throwing up or something sick and you're like, God, please help me, or whatever, I'll never do this again. That's how all my prayers had been up until this point. And I wasn't a religious person at the time. But I had a sincere God help me. And that was it. Like, that was just like, it was like a complete surrender. And I called my mom, said, hey, I really want to get into this VOA program. Can I please come use your phone? She said, yeah, I'll come pick you up. So she brought me up to her house, called. Finally, a bed opened up. And so we're still living in Layton. And she's like, and this place is in Salt Lake. So I don't know why they do it this way. Maybe it's for dramatic reasons or whatever. She just couldn't drive me and drop me off at the VOA. She drove me to a Rite Aid parking lot on like 2nd South and 7th East or somewhere like that, downtown, this shady part of downtown. And the VOA van pulls up. It's got like an American flag on the side, no windows. This big guy gets out. His name is Walter. I still remember. And he looked like Santa Claus. He just comes out of the van and opens the side door. And there's like the cage that separates him from the back. And he's like, get in, no seats, no nothing back there. And this tells you how freaking bad things were for me that I was like, okay, like I just got in the back of this van, said bye to my mom, got in the back of the van, closed the door, and took me off to this place. I had no idea what to expect.
Just a paddy wagon.
Yeah, exactly what it was.
Did you see your buddy there?
Yeah, he was there. He stayed about a week after I got there, and then he left. And by some God's grace, I didn't leave.
And if you leave, I assume you can't go back, or will they let you back?
You can go back, but you have to go through the same. Whenever you call to VOA, they're going to say, we don't have a bed available. Keep trying. And I don't know if it's because they want people that really want to get in there.
Yeah.
But I had to call probably 6 to 12 times before a bed became available for me.
Why is it that why is everybody's rock bottom different? You've been around a lot of addicts. Like I think from looking at thousands of cases, it seems like you hit rock bottom earlier than most, right?
Yes.
What's your take on that? Why is everybody's different?
That's a good question. Could be a pain tolerance thing, but I mean, gosh, there's people. I mean, I've experienced. I'm involved in a 12-step program, so I've sponsored hundreds of people over the last, 26 years. And I've seen, people that possibly were, their insurance was threatening to drop them. That's their bottom, or something like that, yeah. All the way to where this guy's been homeless for a decade, on the streets. And, I really don't know the answer to that question, to be honest with you, but I've seen all throughout the spectrum. And I would always say, like, I feel like it's the hard drugs that made me hit a bottom quicker. But like, there's people I've sponsored and seen in the program to where it's like, you think, wow, that happened to you. And they come in and that, you just think that they're going to grab this thing by the horns and like work the program and get out of it. And then something else, then they go back out and they come back 3 or 4 years later and they still haven't hit that bottom. Like it's, I'm not quite sure what it is.
I mean, a lot of hope until someone hits that bottom, or full surrender, as you call it.
It's the surrender. Yeah. Just being able to admit that you have a problem with drugs and alcohol, yeah, and that you can't manage your own life. I think it's the second half so the first step is just that you're powerless over the drugs and alcohol. And the second half is that your life is unmanageable. I think when you have somebody that maybe has had success in their life and while they were drinking and using, then it's harder for them to admit that their life is unmanageable. You know what I mean? Like functioning alcoholic or addict. Yeah.
Whereas maintenance, it's not, well, I guess it's always maintenance. Looking back, and I know it's been a long time, but were you even getting the effect of the substances that you were using, or was it, I'm going to be dope sick if I don't continue this? Or was it a combination of both?
So, the dope sick thing is more of a like heroin and opiate, like pain pill type thing, to where I think that's more of an effect to where if they just don't feel normal unless they take it. Meth is more of a psychological addiction. You think that you can't function without it. You're not necessarily sick. You may just, the best way I can describe it is when I was coming off meth, I just felt really uncomfortable in my own skin. Like I didn't want to be around people, like just really reclusive, just really like just not okay. Just feel it was more of a mental thing versus I know that I didn't get too far into the opiate thing, but I know that that's more of a physical, like you're sweating, you're having like, you're throwing up, you know what I mean? Like that's, physically dependent. And alcohol too. Like I definitely can't touch alcohol. Like I want to have a drink and be okay with it. You know what I mean? Like,
well, in the time that I've known you, 15 years, there'll be social outings surrounding work or different things like that. And those events, there'll be alcohol, there'll be, this, that, and the other, and you're never there. Why is that?
So it's not that I'm afraid I'm going to drink or use, but when you're, it's just kind of not my jam. Like it's really, I don't want to use the word annoying because I'm not trying to out, but like if you're just around people and they're having a couple of drinks, that's one thing. But when people are getting like shit faced and you're sober and you're around it, it's like really annoying.
I'm asking you why. Yeah, one friends, you never make a deal out of it.
Yeah,
you're never like, that's not for dude. I'm a recovery. You know what I mean? You never bring that up. You just slip out the back door and go home to your wife and kids.
Yeah,
and it's really cool. So I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but I admire you. Because I know what you've been through.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's the 12-step program promises you that if you work through the steps that you're going to have a higher power. Some people call it God. You can choose whatever you want. It doesn't have to be, it's not a religious thing, it's a spiritual thing. And if you work through those steps and you get that higher power in your life, that is what steps in between you and that drink or removes that obsession. Because the disease of alcoholism, the way my sponsor taught it to me is and in the book, my sponsor, straight out of the book guy, there's two parts to it. And the first part is the obsession of the mind. And that's where that idea of the drink or the drug pops into your brain. Once that idea of the drink or the drug pops into your mind, that's all you can think about until you actually take it. Like you're obsessed with it. Like that's the only thing that you care about. Once you give in and you take that drink or that drug, then the second part of the disease comes in, and they call it an abnormal reaction or an allergy to the body. That's where you're drinking to overcome, like you have no control. So the main problem, they say, is in your mind, because if you never had that obsession, you'd never have to deal with the second part, which is the allergy to the body, or what they call it. Once you have it in your system, then nothing else matters. And that's all you're going to do until, you pass out or whatever it is.
How many people have you sponsored over the last 2 decades?
I lost track, man. There's a solid, right now I'm probably only sponsoring 5 to 8 people, and they're mostly guys that have long-term sobriety. And they just call me when, they need to talk about something, or we just go hang out and like buddies would and grab something to eat and, stuff like that. And that's the heartbreaking part about it, is there's tons and tons of guys over the years. I mean, if you look in my book, every time we stop reading, I write their name and the date. And as you get further through the book, there's less and less names and dates because most people don't make it through. I think the statistics they used to say is like 2 out of 100 people make it to 5 years.
Wow.
Is what I was told. Or just staying sober. 2 out of 100 people make it 5 years sober.
Well, how much death have you seen? Loss of life?
Luckily, guys really close to me, not a ton, but guys close to me have lost other people in the program, or other people that I mean, I hear the stories all the time in meetings of people, but yeah, it's really, I feel like if you go in, you work the 12 steps, like I don't want to paint a picture of gloom and doom, but if you go in and give it like your best shot, like really work at it, like you probably got a coin toss on if you're going to stay sober or not. And then the alternative for somebody with a serious drug or alcohol addiction is death, institution, jail. You know what I mean? Like that's like sober, or these are where you're heading. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through your journey at VOA and the 12-step program? Did you have moments when you almost didn't make it? Yeah, walk us through that.
Or more importantly, how many?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah.
So there's a, I mean, even early as in VOA, there were trials, you know, and luckily, I mean, I attribute it to something stepping in and helping me out, but I'd been sober. I went in and, I mean, who gets sober around? So right before I went into VOA, just to paint a picture, it was in November, and like probably a week or two before I went into VOA, or not a week or two, I'm thinking had to have been like a few days, or trying to remember the timeline, but I was out. I wasn't in VOA yet during Thanksgiving, and it was at my parents' house. And so I remember, I through my childhood, before things went haywire, like I was really close with my cousins, like had a lot of good times with them, you know, and I remember I always looked forward to Christmas Eve and Thanksgiving because I'd get to see all my cousins, you know, and sometimes throughout the year, but those were the two big events that I always looked forward to. And Thanksgiving, I was there, and everyone started to show up for Thanksgiving. Some people, my dad had a pool table, they were shooting pool, people were kind of gathering, and I was so uncomfortable in my own skin that I just couldn't be there. And this is right before the dinner and everything, and I just left, and I walked 3 miles to my buddy's house, you know, on the other side of the city or whatever, just because I didn't know what to do. I couldn't be there. Like I was just so uncomfortable. And after I think I got a ride back or something after everything was winding down, and that was just how uncomfortable I was just at that time frame. So week later or so, I'm in the VOA, you know, I'm in the program, and I'd gotten about a week. This is early December then, probably December 8th, 7th, somewhere around in there. And I was out in they have like so let me paint a picture of VOA for you. So you go in VOA, when you first get there, there's, I can't remember how many, probably 30, like this thick mats on the floor, these green, like slippery mats. And that's your bit. You get that, and you get a blanket and a pillow, and you're on the floor.
Huge.
Yeah. And you're on the floor with 30 other dudes, like just lined up. Yep. And so that was, they call that whiskey flats. So that's where all the bottom of the barrel drunk right there. Like once you're in VOA detox for a couple of weeks, there's a bunch of bunk beds that are along the side of the wall, and you get to move up to a bunk bed, and that's called Heroin Heights. They call it over there. So that's where you can like drape a sheet, have a little bit of privacy, maybe trade your ramen noodles, you know, stuff like that. And then if you make it through that, and you've been in VOA for 3 or 4 weeks, there's one room that's across from the kitchen, and there's it's either 2 or 3 sets of bunk beds in that one room, and they call that the cocaine condo. And one,
Hold on. Whiskey Flats, Heroin Heights, and the cocaine condo.
Yep. Cocaine condo, man, you'd arrive, because when you're in cocaine condo, you actually get to work in the kitchen. So you get extra food. So yeah, that's the pinnacle of being in VOA, is once you've reached the condo, like, yeah, you're good to go. That's where all the parties are at. So I'd been in about a week. I was still in Whiskey Flats, and I was out back smoking. There's this smoke man would come. He'd sell you packs of cigarettes through the fence. But I was out there.
Is it full lockdown?
You can leave, but then you're
starting over.
Yeah.
You can't, if you leave the premises, you're starting again at square one, making those phone calls, trying to get in.
Yep. And so Smoke Man would bring cigarettes if you had any money or whatever. And I was out back smoking, and this is my first experience. Some guy pulls out a joint. So I'm like, oh, everyone in here is not sober, you know? So he's smoking the joint. And the first couple of times I'm like, nah, man, I don't know. You know, I'm trying to get sober. Same as my very first time using. Watched it go by a couple of times, and as it was almost gone, I was like, oh, what the hell? Give me a hit. So I took one hit, and I'd been sober like 1 week. I took one hit, and I just remember being overwhelmed with fear and paranoia and all this from one hit of weed, like all this crazy, like I just felt insane. And no, this time I was in Heroin Heights, because I remember I went into my bed and I pulled the covers up over my head, and I just started, like, I knew the Serenity prayer was the only prayer I knew. And so I just repeated it over and over and over in my head again until I, you know, went to sleep or whatever and woke up sober. As crazy as that experience was, this tells you the insanity of alcoholism and drug addiction. I did the same thing a week later. Same exact thing. One hit, crazy, pray, done.
Really?
Yep. And that was that was December 22nd, 1997.
Last time.
December 22nd,
1997.
97.
Yeah. So everyone's always like, oh, what was your last drunk? One hit of weed was my last time.
In VOA.
In VOA.
Is that disqualify you? They find out?
No. Oh, yeah. If they catch you with anything, you're out of there, I'm sure. Yeah.
Were you just clinging?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was great. The food was great in there, too. The food was good because we'd go down to the food bank. Like, once you reach Cocaine Condos, you've got shit to do. Like, you're working in the kitchen. They're sending you down to the free clinic for a physical and a TB shot. Like,
I remember.
Yeah.
How long are you in the condo for?
I mean, the whole process of VOA was like 45 days before they sent me to the other place.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. Like, I mean, this is the thing. I tell this story and I'm like, I loved it in there. Like, it was the first time I had 3 hot meals, a place to sleep, didn't have to worry about any money or this or that. Like, it was great for me. Like, I loved it in there. I had a little romance in there. Some girl that was high on LSD, they dropped her off. I took her under my wing and just protected her from everybody else. And then she obviously wasn't like a hard drug. It was like a scare tactic for her. She was out in 48 hours, but
what was the backtrack a little bit?
Yeah.
The people that came into VOA, would you see some there 3 days?
Oh yeah.
48 hours, a full week, and then they would just
gone.
Maybe you'd rub shoulders with them or become acquaintances with them and friends with them and chop it up, and then bam, they just would hit that.
Yeah.
Would just disappear.
Yeah, some of the homeless people would just come in there to like regroup.
Just to get a meal or two.
Yeah, to get some meals, get some sleep, and then boom. Or like in the winter when it's cold, like they'll drag drunks off. Like if you're on the side of the road and you're going to freeze, like that paddy wagon van will pick them up and bring them over there. Yeah. And then, so like when you're there, like when you're in Whiskey Flats, like you don't know, you're going to have bottom of the barrel drunk, like right next to you, like sleeping next to you, you know, like it's pretty interesting.
Not like Heroin Heights. They're a little more prestigious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a certain time frame when someone goes into a program like that of like, if you make it 7 days, it gets easier, or is it always the whole time? Like, it's always hard.
Everybody's different. So they give you kind of an assessment, like when you first check in there, like what drugs have you been using, blah, blah, blah. And then like some people that are heavy into heroin, like they'd give them like Suboxone or something like that to, you know,
withdrawals.
Yeah. Methadone, I think, was big back then. So they just get them, to get them off it. And so, yeah, they didn't give me anything. So I remember the first time when I was in the Cocaine Condo, the first shady thing I did was they sent us down to the clinic for a physical and a TB shot. And we took a slight detour to the gas station to get a Mountain Dew. Oh yeah, but there's some great people out there, because I wish I knew who some of these people were, but there was some dude that would come by the VOA, and anybody who wanted to go on a walk, he would come by once a week and take, I don't remember if there was a cap on it or how long you had to be there, but he'd take like 10 dudes for a walk. I remember we went and played softball one time, and take us out of the facility for a couple hours and bring us back. And
Were these lots of times people that were addicts themselves who had recovered, or just
yeah, I'm pretty sure that's probably what it was now.
a little?
Yeah. People bring clothes and stuff too.
How has recovery changed in that process from 97, from this when you were in the thick of it, to 2024? Is it very similar? Is the assess kind of the drug and alcohol problem and the recovery process, and if it's evolved or if it's still the same?
I think what's a little bit different now, and maybe this is just me noticing, but there's less I'm an alcoholic or I'm a drug addict. Like now when people come in, they pretty much like to find someone that only drank or to find someone that only used, you know what I mean? Like now the people that are coming in, like a lot of them have opiate issues and stuff like that.
Is that prevalent in Utah more so than around the country, or do you know?
I've been to some AA conferences out of the state and talked to different, people like that. And I think it's a nationwide thing. We had the opioid epidemic, and, I think a lot of people got hooked on it then. And so and I feel like that's a lot. I mean, maybe not somebody that's straight alcohol, because that's really hard for somebody that has been drinking for 20 years to get sober. I mean, could you imagine? You know what I mean? So that's where I feel like I'm pretty lucky that I just hit a bottom and got sober by the grace of God early, because I don't know if I would have used meth for another 10 years, like, I don't think I would have. Yeah.
How has fitness helped? For those listening, Rob is absolutely jacked. Bodybuilding competition, he's a beast. Has that kind of taken over, become a new obsession almost, that replaces what you had?
I'm sure it's a huge part of it. So I always joke around with guys that I sponsor and say, like, I can't stop working out because I basically started recovery and working out at the same time, and I'm not sure which one worked. So I'm not willing to stop doing either.
Yeah.
But I actually attribute that to my sponsor, he's a marathon runner.
Okay.
And so when I asked him to be my sponsor, now backtrack a little bit, I got my sponsor a year and a half sober. So when I went through the entire process of VOA, Salvation Army, and a treatment center, then I got sober and moved back with my parents. I got 2 jobs. I got a girlfriend, started living life. And the problem was, I found out really quick that the problem for me wasn't drugs and alcohol. It was my selfishness, my dishonesty, resentment, fear, all these things that make up an alcoholic. So the drugs and the alcohol was just a symbol or a symptom of my disease. My disease was up here in my head, And so I was 18 months sober. I moved back with my parents, started trying to do life. And what happened is all the reasons why I drank started to creep back up. And I had basically a mental breakdown at my job. I was at Outback Steakhouse this time instead of Tony Roma's, but I just lost it at work. And I punched this ceramic bowl and severed tendons in my hand, and like just drove myself to, the hospital for stitches. And that time, I had another friend in recovery who was going to some meetings, but he had never worked the steps. At this point, I had never worked the steps. And so we went to this meeting, and we both left that meeting with sponsors. And what happened was, after the meeting, there's directions in the book that we use that tells you, like, this is how you're to share the message with a newcomer. And these guys did it perfectly. Like, they hey, we're going to go, they talked with us after the meeting. They said, hey, we're going to go to Village Inn. You want to go? They brought us to Village Inn. They shared their experience, strength, and hope. So they shared what it was like for them with their drinking and using, what happened to them, and what it's like now. And they shared their experience perfect. And so I could relate with them. And I remember thinking for the first time in my life, having a little bit of hope that, man, these guys are living a good life. Like, this thing's work. Maybe this will work for me. And they said, listen, we're going to go meet and go for a jog tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. And I was on the spiritual high after meeting these guys. Oh, sure. Yeah, we'll go. I'll go. And I remember my buddy showing me and they lived in Holiday, Utah, and I lived in Layton still. And so I remember my buddy sitting out in his car at like 5:15 a.m. the next morning. My alarm went off, and I remember thinking, what the hell did I get myself into? I do not want to go jogging right now, I'd never ran a mile in my life, not a freaking mile. And so we drive up to Holiday, and it was more of like a walk run. It wasn't like some hardcore run that I'd built up in my head. But we went 2 miles. So my first time ever running, I went 2 miles. And what happened was, on that run, this guy shared his experience, strength, and hope with me. And I could relate to it, and I felt good. And so I'd drive home on the spiritual high, and then and I'd agreed to show up the next day. And so we drove down again, and 2 miles went to 4 miles, went to 6 miles, went to 10 miles, until I was in full-blown marathon training mode after meeting these guys. And we ended up running like 3 marathons together.
Wow.
As I was going through the steps, working 1 to 2 jobs, and attending the Salt Lake Community College.
How important is a sponsor for someone trying to turn it around?
You're not going to get far without one.
Crucial.
Yeah. If you're a real alcoholic, then that's the direction you need to go.
Yeah.
What I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago. You were clean essentially 18 months, and you said that all these things started to creep back in.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you probably didn't know it at the time, now with all of your experience behind you, you understand that the reason that you were the way you were is because you hadn't dealt with some, is it fair to call it baggage?
Demons. Yeah, I would just demons.
Okay. Obviously you've taken care of those, or maybe you still battle them each day, like maybe we all do. But is that, in your experience, is that why people try to get clean, that relapses? They never go to the root of the problem of why they're abusing something, or why they're uncomfortable in their own skin.
So it's pretty cool the way that the 12 steps are set up, because it's basically giving you a way to deal with that stuff. And so, as I talked about before, your first step is just admitting you have a problem and that you're powerless, right? Second step after that is just having an idea, or there might be something out there that can help me. Being willing to believe there's something out there that could help you. That's all you have to do, is just be willing. I can't say yes. If I went into AA and they're like, you got to say that you believe in Jesus Christ right now, or you're not going to, I would have been like screwed. But they were like, hey, we just need you to just kick the door open. Just, are you willing to believe there's something out there more powerful than you that might be able to help you out? Yeah, I can accept that. Great. Let's go on to step 3. Step 3 is you're going to turn your will and your life over to whatever that is. You don't have to have it defined. You can just say, you know what? Whatever it is, I'm not doing a good job. Here you go. And then this is where you lose 75. I'm just pulling statistics out of my head, but this is where you're going to lose 3/4 of the people that you're taking through the book, is step 4, because it's the first time you have to get off your ass and do something. So then at this point in step 4, you have to make a list. At first, it sounds cozy because you're just going to make a list of everybody that's harmed you in your life. It's called a grudge list or a resentment list. So you're going to talk about so-and-so did me wrong here and so-and-so did me wrong here. And after you go through, and I just went through my whole life and wrote down all these resentments, then you're going to have, then your sponsor, if you're being taken through the book the correct way, is going to have you bring him that list. He's going to look at it and say, okay, now you're going to go back through that list and put in what your part is in every single one of these. So obviously some resentments, you're like, well, I don't have a part. That guy screwed me over or whatever. Maybe your part is just hanging on to that resentment, you know, but you got to go through and address every single one of those and what your part was in that. And then once that's completed and you think you're done, then you have a whole list of, they call it a fear list, everything that you're afraid of that you have to write down every single thing you're afraid of. And then you have to go through a sex inventory and write down everything there. And then just when you think you're done, my sponsor's like, okay, so now I want you to get some 3x5 cards, and you're going to write down on each one of those cards your deepest, darkest secrets, the things you thought you were never going to tell anybody, the things that we call them the take it to the grave secrets. You're going to write those down, each one on a 3x5 card. Once you complete that, then the real fun begins, and you get to go sit down with, you can choose whoever you want. If you're a member of the Mormon church, you can pick your bishop. If you're a member of the Catholic church, you can pick a priest. If you're whatever, you can read that list to a hobo on the street. You know what I'm saying? Like, but you have to divulge that. And obviously most people just read it to their sponsor, you know, is kind of the way that it goes. And I remember my sponsor, he would his deal was he'd drive you to Wendover. And so at nighttime, so you'd be there with a flashlight, like reading your stuff all the way out to Wendover. You get to Wendover, he gives you a $10 roll of quarters to gamble and buys you dinner, and then you drive back home. So how it goes, and this is my favorite part, is the second you get in the car and you're starting to drive, he says, pull out those 3x5 cards. It's like, there's no messing around, bro. It's like straight to the dirt. So you're sitting there reading off this stuff, and you can just imagine what's on those 3x5 cards, but to each there, everyone has theirs, you know? And so, I did that. And then the rest of it's just, I mean, I think my sponsor's probably fallen asleep at the wheel listening to the other resentments. You know what I mean? But you're looking for patterns in your life when you're reading through that list. Like, what are these things that keep occurring over and over again? And what are these character defects, and why are they happening? And you're trying to identify these things, because that's what you're essentially in the following steps going to ask to be removed, your higher power to remove from you.
Okay.
So, but just I mean, you feel kind of weird, and like after you're done with it, at least my experience was, I was like, I mean, yeah, maybe a weight lifted off your shoulders, but it was more of just kind of like, someone knows everything about me. You know what I mean? So
I didn't know that the steps were such a spiritual process.
Yeah.
I had no idea. What are the rest of the steps? You got us through 4, 5.
So yeah, 5 is just you're reading off your list and going through, telling everybody everything, basically. And then 6 and 7 kind of are lumped together, where you're just willing to have these character defects removed from you. And then 7's asking them to be removed. So those 2 steps kind of go hand in hand. And then from there, you are steps 8 and 9. And so that's where you're making a list. So you're going to take your list of resentments, go through it with your sponsor, and pick out everybody on there that you may or may not owe an amends to. So when I take a guy through, he'll say, oh, there's this guy, and I don't really think I owe an amends. And if I think he does, then I'll point out the reason why, and I'll say, keep him on the list. And so we'll go through the list and determine who you owe an amends to and who you don't. That's step 8. And then step 9 is you're going out one by one and making those wrongs right. And for a serial shoplifter like myself, it was a fun process. That I'll tell you what, though, that was the easy amends. The easy ones are, hey, 10 years ago, I stole a Game Boy from ZCMI. I need to pay you for that. Oh, well, yeah, we've written that. It doesn't matter. I need to pay you for that. Okay, here's a check. You know, if there's anything else I can do to make it up, make it right, let me know. But man, when I started making those amends, when I started paying people back that I owed money, you know, and I started doing those, like, it was like immediate. I was getting immediate, it was like a drug for me. Like I'd go make an amends and I'd feel amazing. Like there's nothing like people are praising you. I can't believe you're doing that. That's such a great, no, but here's the thing, and a lot of people don't really realize when they're out there. There was this kid that when I was in one of the alternative high schools that we hung out with, and we just used him, for money, drugs, have it, whatnot. And I remember one time we dropped him off at his house and he ran inside and his garage was open. And I ran in and stole a chainsaw out of his garage because I knew I could hawk it and get some money for it. And so hawked it, got money, whatever. Didn't even think about it until I'd going through this list, right? So I was actually at the Salt Lake Community College, out in between classes, and I saw the kid and I was like, hey, and then it all that clicked and I was like, I need to make amends to his dad. I stole that chainsaw. So I got his dad's contact info and I said, hey man, I called him up and I said, hey, I need to come talk with you. Is there a time I can come talk with you? He said, yeah, sure. Give me a time. I went over to his house. I'm sitting down in the guy's living room. I had done my research on how much a chainsaw cost. I had $200 or whatever it was in my pocket to pay him. And I said, we're sitting there and I said, look, man, I used to hang out with your son. And one time we dropped him off. I stole a chainsaw from you. I need to make it right. And the guy kind of sat there in silence for a minute and then teared up a little bit. And he said, all these years, I thought my own son had stolen that chainsaw.
Really?
And he'd blamed his kid for it, for something that I did for all those years. And so, man, that one did not make me feel really good. So I paid the guy, but knowing that maybe he could let go of that hate in his heart, and you just don't realize who you're affecting by what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so that was a painful lesson to learn. And there was plenty more where I had to, I got all the pay the money back ones done quick. That was the easy part. Like all the other ones were bad, were hard. A lot of emotion. Yeah.
People that
screwed over. And then it's just, and then there's lifetime amends. Like I'm never going to be able to 100% make right what I put my parents through or my siblings through, stuff like that, to where it's like, now if your parents call and they say, hey, can you help me do this? The answer needs to be yes. Like, or if anything, anytime that they ask me anything, it just needs to be like, I owe them a lifetime of amends. So that we call those lifetime amends. So you never really get out of those,
Yeah.
So
since this journey, and you're clean 18 months, and you start to go through these steps, you meet your wife, you've got beautiful children. I mean, if you weren't willing to share your story, Rob, with people, they wouldn't believe it. I was looking on my phone as you were talking a few minutes ago because I have a picture of you, I think when you were 20. Have you ever seen it?
I know which one you're talking about, where I'm in a wife beater with the long hair.
Yeah.
Or the shaved head. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're 225, less than 10% body fat. You've done fitness. Like you lift, if you don't lift every day, you used to. Very cognizant of what you eat. We call you turkey wrap because all you eat is turkey.
Oh God, I can't even look at one of those anymore, bro. 6 months straight of nothing but turkey wraps.
Gotta believe in a lot of your coincides with you getting clean, and it kind of all, took place at once. Do you feel like you've accomplished something? Do you feel like do you pat yourself on the back for having overcome what you've overcome? How's it shaped your life since you're in the 20s?
Not a whole lot of patting myself on the back, just because I feel like every day that I don't drink or use is a gift, really. I mean, sure, I'm obviously most cherished accomplishments are my wife and kids, for sure. Like that's, and my dog. But yeah, it's all the fitness journeys and all that stuff. Like it's crazy because I didn't graduate college, but I went for like 4 years and then, the industry I got into and looked down and realized, well, the degree I'm going for makes a quarter of the money that I'm currently making doing, and I love what I'm doing. So I dropped out of college. I did attend for 4 years and I did learn. I had some marketing classes and some business classes that I think were indispensable. I learned how to be social with people again. That's where I feel like education is important, just because the social aspect, not necessarily what you're being taught there, but I think to be out on your own, responsible, all that stuff, it really benefited me. But I couldn't tell you, outside of my marketing and business classes, like I couldn't tell you anything that I retained from there, So the marathons, I feel like were huge accomplishments. And those were done through fellowship and through a lot of praying to that higher power. I mean, once you hit mile 16, 17, there's nothing left in the tank. So it's a lot of, we call it God consciousness, just being in contact and, hey, God, get me through, just a little bit further, casting out, my sponsor would be just like, you're casting out, you pick something up there in the distance and you cast out your fishing pole and then you reel it in. And when you get to that, you cast your pull out again. I mean, you guys know when you're on a bike and you're on a 50, 100 mile, at some point it's like all mental.
Yeah.
It's not physical anymore. And so those were huge accomplishments. The big one, you mentioned the bodybuilding shows, the fitness competitions and stuff like that. There was a lot of discipline that went into those and hard work, and to see that thing all the way through a couple of times was a pretty cool deal, and I remember my motivation for it though. At some point you have everyone has their dreams, you find out, I want to be sponsored by a supplement company, till you find out that's all bullshit and it's not really worth all what it's, cracked up to be. But the motivation was, especially the second time, is I remember I want to show my kids that I can start something hard and finish something hard. And that was, I remember I took my first bodybuilding show pretty serious until I found out kind of how those things go. And then the second one, I obviously took it serious, but I remember walking out on stage and waving to my kids that were down there watching me, like making sure they knew this, hey, this is why I'm here. You guys are why I'm here. And, man, it's been a crazy deal to watch. I mean, I've watched my wife lose weight after both kids and work out and train and be disciplined. And I've watched both my kids really, like my daughter's on the drill team and she's a captain and she's done all for, you know what I mean? Like I don't know how they do it, but she's got to get up at 5 a.m. and go do this stuff. And like she goes through and does all this. And then my son, same thing with baseball, competitive baseball and football. Like I never thought he wanted to play football until one year. He's like, Dad, I want to play tackle football. And he went, and to watch him, like, it's funny when you have kids, because you see, like, I'd see my son in football or something, and like something would happen to him, like he'd take a hard hit or something like that. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, he's freaking done. Like there's no way, but he just gets up and keeps going. Like I would put myself onto my kids and just think like they were going to respond to things the same way that I do, and they don't. And that's so freaking awesome to find. Like it took me a while to realize like, wow, he's not me, or she's not me. Like she's not going to quit like I did. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, to be where you were, to recover it, and then have your kids be like that. They're disciplined, like Jack, for example. I'm just going to use your boy's name because I love the kid. For him to have all those skills, that didn't just happen. He learned that from his mother and his father. and to overcome what you overcame and then show that discipline to your kids. They're there because of the effort that you put in. And that's really cool. You know, it's really cool. So if you're not going to pat yourself on the back, I will, because your story is pretty incredible. 26 years sober?
Mm-hmm.
Like the math, right?
Yeah.
26 years. And you've spoken with your 12-step program at various conventions. I know you sponsored hundreds of people through that time frame, and you're still young. You still got more to do. Lifetime of them.
Yeah. I mean, I still attend meeting. I've got a home group that unless one of my kids have a game or something, I'm there every week.
Every week.
Yeah. Every Monday night. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. There's lots of brothers in there that I love. You know, there's guys that have been on this journey. I mean, I just went to dinner the other night with a guy that, I mean, we've been 20 years. You know, he came in around the same time I did, and we share our lives together. You know, we talk and about what's going on, and that's one of the biggest thing is they say recovery begins when one alcoholic sits down and shares experience, strength, and hope with another alcoholic, and that's when recovery begins. And that's like I could be completely crazy, out of my mind, nutty, because I'm an alcoholic. I'm still a human being. I'm still we still get crazy, but you could sit down with another alcoholic just for a little bit and talk like we are right now and just feel better. You know what I mean? That's where it all starts, because life and like myself mostly will get in the way of my connection with my higher power. And I will shut myself off from the sunlight of the Spirit. I will cut myself off from God. And I need people to sit down and talk with and to get and remember, oh yeah, there is a God. Oh yeah, life is good. Oh yeah, like the world's in chaos, but I don't need to sit here in the sunshine and worry about the world's problems, you know? So it's been challenging the last few years, as you guys have known, you know, just with everything going on in the world, to just stay positive and remember, oh yeah, there is a God. It's not me. Like, things are going to be okay. Like, that's just, you know, my sponsor always says, like, if I sit and talk to him and complaining about some politics or some other crap, and he'll be like, where's God in all this? And I'm like, oh shit. That's like your end all for everything, man. Where's God in all this? And I'm like, you're right.
What would you leave that listener that maybe is having some struggles, whether it's alcoholism, drug abuse? What would you say, person, as we were?
You know, I would say, go check out a 12-step meeting, and listen. You might hear your story, and you're going to be ready when you're like, I'd been to some 12-step meetings and stuff like that previous to that 18 months when I started really getting active, but I just never really related or heard any messages. It wasn't until I was ready, and when I sat down with those two guys that shared their experience, strength, and hope with me, that I got that glimpse of hope that if it can work for these goofballs, it can work for me. You know what I mean? And so I would just say, try and jump into a 12-step meeting and see if you can't relate. Talk to some, you know, people that you know that are in recovery. But it's unfortunate with drug and alcohol addiction that a lot of people, they're not going to hear anything until they're ready to hear. Like, they don't want to, you know, you put me a year earlier, I wouldn't have listened to anybody, you know?
Yeah. I was going to say, you've told me, because I lost a friend to addiction recently. And I remember you telling me, you know, some people's rock bottom, you can't do anything. I don't want to use the term survivor's remorse or anything like that. Everybody always wonders when they lose someone, whether they leave their life and they're still alive and they're functioning, but they're addicts or alcoholics, but they're no longer part of their life, that they could have done more. They should have done more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's bullshit. I think that Yes, you have to love people, but people can only fix themselves. They need others to lean on. Am I wrong in this kind of reality of people? They have to want it for themselves, and until they do, they're never going to. And I'm not saying you give up hope. What I'm saying is, people need to want it for themselves. Like you said, if it was a year earlier, would have fallen on deaf ears.
Oh, basically, what I believe is that only God can remove that alcoholism or that drug addiction. That's it. Doesn't matter what anybody says or anybody does. What I can say from my own experience is that by my parents being tough and not enabling me is what helped me to hit that rock bottom faster and get about the business of getting sober. So, I hear you can love someone to death, right? You can just, okay, here's $20 more. Well, you're enabling them. They're just going to go that much, until they're ready, they're not going to do anything about it. I mean, back to a question we had earlier about in VOA, there's 2 people I know of for sure that were in there when I was in there that are dead. There are 2 people in there. One of them was my buddy's brother, and my buddy actually went back out, and his brother died. And then there's another fellow that was on the bunk right next to me that he's gone. And that's just 2 that I've heard of. You know what I mean? Like, and so I've had friends who have had a roommate who was in recovery commit suicide. I've had someone who was close to my wife and I through her work commit suicide, because of this disease. Like, it's a real problem. I mean, if you just go to any major city right now, and like I was just in Vegas for one of my son's baseball tournaments, and we were up at the north end of town because that's where the field was. And I dropped him off to get warmed up, and I just went and drove around, and there's people walking around like zombies everywhere, and that's in these big cities. I mean, it's just, there's no shortage of people who need this program, but it's for people who want it and who want to change, and,
Yeah. Well, Rob, thank you for coming on. You have to know, I admire you like nobody else. You know what I mean? I think you're an amazing individual, and to hear your story or refresh me even with some more details that I haven't heard is amazing. Seth, I've never heard the stories probably like since.
Well, he wouldn't be wrong. You've got an incredible story. Thanks for sharing it with us.
How do people get in touch with you, Rob? I know you're on social media a little bit.
I mean, if you want help with recovery, you can just hit me. I don't even know. I've got a couple of different Instagrams.
Flex on with
Sneakers of Utah.
with the
Oh yeah, go hit me up on the sneaker page. No, that's another addiction. Yeah, just go to iron_shark77 if you want to meet up for coffee or need someone, have questions about 12-step program or, hit me up there.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it, boss.
Thank you guys.